Philip K. Dick was one of the most prolific, insightful, accurate, and arguably insane authors in all of American literary history. But, as Bob Wilson said, there are periods in history when the visions of madmen and dope fiends are a better guide to reality than the common-sense interpretation of data available to the so-called normal mind. This is one such period, if you haven't noticed already. I believe never has that been more true than of the writing of Philip K. Dick. We could go into the exegesis, his belief in the pink beam, the underlying idea that our culture and civilization was simply an expression of the Roman Empire with an overlay of technological baubles. But we'll save that as well as several other deeper lore discussions for another time, and instead I will combine my two loves of cinema and literature to discuss A Scanner Darkly. This is facilitated by the fact that the movie adaptation of the novel is nearly word for word, providing me with a simple visual platform upon which to illustrate my points. This is not going to be a scene-by-scene breakdown or a comparison to the book, or even an overall review of either. In this way, I would hope to shuffle the plot and avoid spoilers, so you can still go and enjoy these works to their fullest. I'm going to choose, in this, to highlight what I see as the three main themes of the work: the surveillance state and paranoia, muddled thinking and identity struggles, and finally, humanity and empathy for those otherwise labeled the dregs of society. In this way, I hope to simultaneously celebrate the life and work of one of my favorite authors and extract from his work, through my life experiences, some deeper truths that Phil reveals about circulating in the drug trade, and why I argue that, despite the fact that hard drug use is a common theme in American literature, from William Burroughs to Jerry Stahl to Hubert Shelby Jr., and the fact that Substance D is actually a stand-in for real substances, that A Scanner Darkly by far more perfectly exemplifies the common drug user traversing their late 20s and early 30s than these other works. And I say that as a fan of all of the above. Substance D was the perfect literary device to sidestep the junkie's first offense, no matter his substance. Yeah, but I'd never do X by making Substance D an every drug. They did not even do this at the expense of the existence of other drugs in this universe, as things like cocaine and marijuana are mentioned by name.
I want to buy from her.
Donna does coke, right?
$3 doesn't get you a line of coke.
That's where you're wrong, pal.
But instead as a stand-in for the main character's drugs of choice, the effects of which seem to be either the late-stage effects of amphetamine binges with bugmen and visual hallucinations or some hallucinogenic itself. Impossible to tell, and never clarified, to the benefit of the reader, I think. I honestly believe that the defensive nature of the drug user's psyche can be short-circuited by avoiding such specifics. It's not hard to ignore the messages of Requiem for a Dream or Permanent Midnight by simply asserting that you'll never touch that junk. So, instead, make it all junk, or in a more Eastern phrasing, junk without form, or junk no junk. That said, one of Philip K. Dick's main themes in many of his books is the idea of mass surveillance. The movie and book both imply this with a warning scene, that no matter where you are, no matter how petty it seems, they are watching you, and they can choose to scoop you up at any time. This played out in Phil's personal paranoia and his belief that the federal government had broken into his house and tampered with his writings. This is one of those instances where Phil's strength of observation, combined with following any idea to its logical conclusion, in this case the escalating war on drugs, combined to create a dystopian future not far enough away from our own reality to easily dismiss. The scramble suits are just a futuristic version of the ninja suits actual DEA and local law enforcement informants and undercover officers wear. But, beyond just obscuring the wearer's features, the scramble suits play a further role in the story as symbols of the fracturing identity of Bob Arctor, referred to in his suit as Fred, further muddling his sense of identity. This fracturing seems exemplified if not exacerbated by the scramble suits being his only means of interaction while not working undercover. Thus, the real Bob Arctor slowly fades even from his own perception, and the perception of others. His own bosses do not know who he is, and he doesn't know who they are. Cogs, numbers, codes, the humanity stripped from both parties. For their own safety, of course. I think Philip K. Dick intrinsically understood what a struggle it must be to work undercover, and how difficult this compartmentalization of identities must be on the human psyche. Throw in a few trips, and a man might get to wondering if he's clever enough to be hiding a third identity from even himself.
Crazy job they gave me. But if I wasn't doing it, someone else would be. And they might get it wrong. They might set Arctor up, plant drugs on him, and collect a reward. Better it be me, despite the disadvantages. Just protecting everyone from Barris is justification in itself.
A Scanner Darkly, the title itself, is a reference to both this overwhelming surveillance state in the form of cameras or scanners installed by Bob Arctor himself, and a modified Bible quote used later by Bob Arctor, which, in its ancient Greek, which Phil almost assuredly was aware of, implies that humanity in general sees itself obscured, imperfectly, but in a moment of Bob's desperation and crumbling sense of self and reality, he comes to hope that somehow, something, somewhere, can see more clearly than he can, be they government scanner or deity.
What does a scanner see? I hope it sees clearly because I can't any longer see into myself. I see only Mark. I hope for everyone's sake the scanners do better. Because if the scanner sees only darkly the way I do, then I'm cursed, and cursed again.
This serves to nicely tie the main two themes of the novel together, as the minion of the surveillance state simultaneously tries to serve his function and struggles with answering who he even is.
Crazy job they gave me. But if I wasn't doing it, someone else would be. And they might get it wrong. They might set Arctor up, plant drugs on him, and collect a reward. Better it be me.
The theme of being caught, of being arrested for their various crimes against society, of pursuit and of capture for these perceived crimes is arguably the main driving theme of the work, even for Bob Arctor, who eventually can no longer be certain that he is not pursuing himself for the crimes that he himself has forgotten. Thus, even the drug enforcement officer, through the constant game of cat and mouse and who watches the watcher, and a fragmenting sense of identity, can no longer be certain he himself is not being watched, or worse, needs to be watched.
Do you know this man?
Sure do. You're James Barris, aren't you? So, Mr. Barris, what's your information?
I have evidence that Mr. Arctor is part of a covert terrorist drug organization. They're well funded, and they have arsenals of weapons at their disposal.
And what is this organization?
I believe it to be political in nature, and very much against this country. Mr. Arctor also...
Hold up.
seemingly...
You think there's anything to this, Fred?
I think we should definitely look at his evidence.
All right.
In this story, the theme of the surveillance state, its treatment of the individual, and the eventual degradation of the individual's identity was intentionally intertwined, as I think Phil saw something inherently inhuman and even grinding for the officers involved. This paranoia and fragmenting of the real also leads to many of the work's perceivably lighter moments. The car sabotage scene.
All right. This screw has been turned all the way out, the idle screw. So, when the linkage parted, it went the other way, up instead of down.
Wait, now how could that happen? There is no way that that screw could turn itself all the way out like that accidentally.
No way.
Motherfucker! They did it deliberately! We almost died! They almost fucking got...
The discussion about being ripped off for an 18-speed bike.
Why do you say it's an 18-speed when it only has 9 gears?
Huh? What?
Yeah. 6 right here, 3 at the other end of the chain. 6 plus 3 equals 9. It's a 9-speed bike. 6 here, and then 2 in the front. That makes 8.
What do you think happened to the missing gears?
Think? I know. They were probably working on it, these gypsy grifters, with improper tools and no technical knowledge, no understanding of reverse engineering, and when they attempted to reassemble it, they panicked, they got scared, and they left 9 orphan gears. They're just laying on the floor. They're probably still there on the floor of the garage.
Let's just go rescue the orphan gears, dude!
Don't. There's only one thing we can do. To thwart the plot of these albino shape-shifting lizard bitches, we are going to take this bike outside, ask the first person we see. We're going to introduce some novelty. That way we get an objective viewpoint.
I'm fine, Hegel!
By the way, I might take you up on that $60 offer.
No, that was for an 18-speed.
Oh,
Now, for this, 18
God.
minus 10, I'll give you $23.75.
Are you certain that's the right math on that?
The return to find their dwelling occupied, and the discussion of how best to market a house which might or might not have a collection of drugs stashed throughout it.
check the wall sockets. I'll tear this phone apart.
Wait, hold on. If they see us scrambling around right before the raid. What raid? If we are running around frantically trying to flush the drugs, then we can't allege, even though it's true that we didn't know they were here. They're going to find us holding them. Or maybe that's part of the plan.
Oh, shit! We can't do anything. We're fucked, man.
Sell the house and move out? We put it in the LA Times. Modern, 3-bedroom tract house with 2 bathrooms for easy and fast flushing. High-grade drugs stashed throughout all rooms, included in sale price. It could actually increase the value.
All seems to be inserted for levity or wackiness, until you realize that these are moments of horror, moments of the purest, most illogical, most dangerous type of paranoia edging in on their thoughts. This is exemplified by juxtaposing the bike scene with a failed object identification exam, bringing the levity of the previous scene into sharp contrast.
Within the apparently meaningless lines is an object that we would all recognize. You're to tell me what that object is and point to it in the total field.
In many of those taking substance D, a split between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain occurs, which results in a defect within both the percept and cognitive systems, although apparently the cognitive continues to function normally. Have you located the familiar object in this line drawing?
They blow off steam later in a manner typical of druggies in this moment, too. After several scenes of confusion and self-doubt, there's a scene of them bullying Frick. Frick has to be pushed away in this moment, as he's now a symbol for their worst-case scenario. This is why they must insist that he's done too much, because otherwise they have to admit that they are all almost as fractured as he is. They are just over that cusp of functionality. Just.
It means that if you take too much of that stuff, you not only start seeing and feeling buggy bugs all over you, but you start talking like, and no one can understand you.
What'd you say, Barris? I didn't understand.
See, you guys are fucked up. No, it is you-goo that are fucked up.
Hey, go wreck yourself.
Don't take the car, you'll kill yourselves.
Despite all this, despite the deep, lasting flaws of these characters, one is overall left with the impression that Phil loved them. One gets the impression from almost every story Phil wrote that these were real people to him, if not directly based on someone he knew, then of several someones he knows. Archetypes of a new form, a modern drug scene's Jungian collection. Frick, the feckless, innocent, burned-out but harmless one. Barris, the haughty pseudo-intellectual working the angles that views all the other junkies around him as lesser beings, despite being just as mentally incapacitated by his drug use as the rest. Luckman, the beachcomber hippie type, was never going to be bright but fundamentally not bad. And Bob, the stand-in simultaneously for our author and the reader's perspective, who mostly comes off as trying his hardest not to look fucked up. Anyone familiar with this lifestyle knows these people. Immediately someone jumps to mind. Sometimes one even finds oneself in the worst light. But one is left with the impression that Phil, well, he loved these people. He loved them despite their flaws, and he saw the real humanity that was expressed in these situations, and respected them for their choices even. In a few exchanges, we see this message coming through, and he understood in a time when this understanding was not common, that these people were not monsters, crooks, and thieves, just humans, flawed and complicated, lying to themselves as much as anyone else, and no more, really.
Substance D?
Ate his head. Another loser.
It's easy to win. Anybody can win.
I find this tone to be the most powerful thread in the work, and the one that most separates it from the driving ambition of Requiem or the self-obsessed tone of Permanent Midnight. The level of sympathy for the characters and the understanding that often it's not a dramatic romantic spiral to rock bottom or a product of ambition. Often it's just people that wanted to play, but for whom playing in the street became fatal, or nearly so. And it provides to the reader perhaps one of the most valuable and functional insights available about this subculture of America. I'll close with the same list that Phil did, and I will choose to withhold adding to this list of names my fallen comrades. I hope you've enjoyed my personal reflections on Philip K. Dick's A Scanner Darkly, and I would advise that if you haven't read the book or seen the movie, to do both. And I'm off to bring little blue flowers to my friends, maybe on Thanksgiving.